The vast expanse of space was home to countless civilizations, but one stood above all others, the Queen of Lies, ruler of Atria. Her power was legendary, able to deceive even the wisest beings with a mere word, to twist truths into lies so convincing that entire worlds could be controlled. Her reputation spread far and wide, leaving a trail of broken hearts and shattered minds. Her lies had no equal, and her enemies always fell without fail to the web she wove. But there was one being who caught her attention. Arden, a human, diplomat from Earth. He arrived on Atria with the hope of negotiating peace between his people and the various species of the galaxy. The Earth Union had grown strong over the years, and the young human representative had proven to be clever, quick-witted, and respected by all. The Queen of Lies had heard of Arden's arrival. At first, she saw him as just another easy target, another creature to manipulate with her magic. However, there was something about him that intrigued her. His sharp eyes, his unshakable confidence, and his ability to maintain composure in front of powerful aliens made her pause. There was a certain resilience in this human that set him apart from others, and that made him dangerous. The Witch Queen knew that her power over others had always been enough to bring them to their knees. Her voice alone could persuade any creature to do her bidding. Her illusions could make even the strongest lose their minds. But this human, this Arden, felt different. She could feel his mind was strong, his thoughts unpredictable, unlike the others she had faced. She had never been deceived herself, and now she wondered if this human might be the one to finally expose her as a fraud. In her palace high above the glittering city of Atria, she made her plans. With her immense magical power, she would carefully approach Arden, using the full extent of her craft. She would test him, push him, see just how much control she could have over him. If she could bend him to her will, it would prove that no being, no matter how stubborn or strong, could resist her lies. The Queen knew that Arden was not just another diplomat. His mind was different. He was strategic and calculating. It would be a challenge to get past his defenses, but that only made the game more interesting. She could already picture him in her web, caught like a fly in a spider's trap, struggling to understand that it was already too late. At first, the Queen planned to be subtle. She would use her charm and power to invite him to her court under the guise of a peaceful meeting, an exchange of ideas. She would weave her illusions carefully, letting him see only what she wanted him to see, offering him glimpses of power, glory, and unimaginable riches. She would make him believe that only by allying with her could he achieve his highest goals. It would be the perfect deception. But as she prepared, something gnawed at her, an unease she couldn't shake. She could feel the power of Arden's mind from across the room, even though he had not yet arrived. The Queen's magic had always worked perfectly before, but something about this human, this Arden, was different. She was used to beings bending to her will without question. But what if, for the first time in her long reign, she failed? No, she thought to herself, I will not fail. She would make him believe. Arden would fall into her grasp just like all the others. He would become a pawn in her game, his every move controlled by her whispers, his thoughts guided by her magic. Her thoughts turned to the challenge before her. A human diplomat, a simple creature from a relatively young world compared to the ancient civilizations of the galaxy. What could he possibly know that would make him immune to her power? The Witch Queen smiled to herself. She would bend him, just like all the others. She would have him so completely under her control that he would never even realize how deep he had fallen into her trap. But as her plan began to take shape, one thought stayed with her, gnawing at the edges of her mind. What if Arden was the first human to slip through her grasp? What if this human, so simple and yet so different, was the one who could not be deceived? With that thought hanging over her, the Queen of Lies prepared to meet Arden. She knew that the game had already begun, and though she would deceive him, twist his mind and make him believe in things that weren't true, there was one thing she didn't know. Arden was already playing his own game, and he wasn't going to be as easy to fool as she thought. The grand hall of the Witch Queen's palace was a sight to behold. Tall columns of crystal reached toward the sky, their surfaces shimmering with 1,000 colors. Soft, melodic music filled the air, and the floor was covered in rich, dark velvet, making every step feel like a dance. The Queen's court was a place of beauty and grandeur, a perfect setting for her manipulations. Arden stepped into the hall, his eyes scanning the room. He was a young man, but his presence was strong. He was not dazzled by the beauty of the place, nor was he intimidated by the glittering beings that surrounded him. Instead, he remained calm, his posture straight and his eyes sharp, studying every detail. He had come to Atria on a mission to establish a peaceful connection between Earth and the other species in the galaxy. But something about this place felt off. It was too perfect, too controlled. The Witch Queen, standing at the far end of the hall, watched him approach. Her presence was magnetic, drawing the eyes of everyone in the room. She wore a gown made of flowing silver fabric that shimmered like the moon's surface. Her skin glowed with an otherworldly light, and her eyes sparkled with the knowledge of countless secrets. When she smiled, the entire room seemed to lighten. She was the epitome of grace and power, a being who could bend the minds of those around her with a single word. Arden had heard stories of the Queen's abilities, of her power to deceive and control. But as he walked toward her, he kept his mind focused. He was here for a purpose, and nothing was going to distract him from that. The Queen greeted him with a warm, welcoming smile, her voice soft, yet commanding. "Welcome to Atria, Arden of Earth," she said. "I've been looking forward to meeting you." Arden bowed politely, but he didn't let his guard down. "It's an honor to be here, Your Majesty." "I'm sure it is," she replied smoothly, her eyes never leaving his. "The Earth Union has made quite an impression on the galaxy. You must be very proud of your people." "I am," Arden said, meeting her gaze. "But I'm here to help create a future where all of us can live in peace. That is why I've come to Atria, to open a dialogue and form a stronger bond between our worlds." The Queen's smile widened, but there was something unreadable in her eyes. "Peace," she repeated softly, almost as if tasting the word. "How admirable. And yet you must know that peace is not always so simple. Sometimes the cost of peace is far greater than we are willing to pay." Arden felt a slight chill in her words, but he didn't flinch. "I believe that peace is worth any cost. It's the only way forward." The Queen took a step closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "And yet you have no idea what you're asking for, do you? To truly secure peace, one must understand the depths of power. And sometimes the price of that power is far steeper than one can imagine." Arden didn't respond immediately. He was beginning to understand what was happening. The Queen was testing him, trying to use her charm and subtle influence to plant seeds of doubt. She wanted him to believe that peace was impossible without her guidance, without her manipulation. But Arden had studied her, and he wasn't so easily swayed. He had known that she would try to twist the conversation into something more complicated, more self-serving. He could feel her pulling at his thoughts, weaving her influence into the conversation like a thread. But he refused to let it take root. "Power isn't what will bring peace," Arden said calmly, standing his ground. "It's trust, understanding, and mutual respect, and that's what I'm here to offer." The Queen's eyes narrowed slightly, but her smile didn't falter. She had expected resistance, but not this kind of resistance. Humans were known for their stubbornness, but this Arden, was different. He wasn't like the others who had come before him, swayed by her beauty, her power, or her promises. "You are very wise for someone so young," the Queen said, her voice dripping with honey. "But you must understand that the galaxy is not as simple as you think. There are forces at play here that you cannot even begin to comprehend. Sometimes the only way to ensure peace is through control. And I, dear Arden, can offer you control." Arden's eyes flickered. He could feel the pressure of her magic pushing against his mind, trying to plant ideas, to shape his thoughts. It was subtle, but he knew what she was doing. He had read about the Queen's abilities, her power to make others see things that weren't real, to twist their perceptions of reality. But he was prepared. "I don't want control," Arden replied, his voice steady. "I want peace. True peace. Not the kind that comes from manipulation." For a moment, there was silence. The Queen studied him, her expression unreadable. Then slowly her smile returned, though this time it was colder. "Very well, Arden. We shall see if peace can be achieved without control. But remember, nothing is ever as simple as it seems." With that, she turned away, signaling the end of their conversation. Arden followed her with his eyes, a feeling of unease settling in his chest. He knew the Queen's words weren't empty. She was testing him, trying to find a crack in his resolve, but Arden was ready. He wouldn't let her deceive him, not today. Arden's second day on Atria was meant to be a peaceful exchange, a chance to explore the culture and history of the planet. But the Queen of Lies had other plans. After their first meeting, she had sensed a flicker of resistance in him, something she rarely encountered in those she dealt with. Most beings, even the most powerful, would have succumbed to her charms by now, their minds wrapped in her illusions. But Arden was different. He was focused, calm, and, more importantly, aware. The Queen decided to push him further, to test just how much he could resist. That afternoon she invited him to the heart of her palace, a grand chamber filled with ancient artifacts and holographic displays that told the story of Atria's rise to power. The walls were covered in glowing symbols that shimmered in the dim light, and the air was thick with the scent of fragrant flowers. The Queen sat on a throne of silver and crystal, her gaze never leaving Arden as he entered. "I wanted to show you something," she said, her voice as smooth as silk. "Something that may help you understand why your people must join me." Arden stepped forward, his eyes scanning the room but never focusing on anything for too long. He knew better than to be distracted by the grandeur of the place. His mind was set on his mission, and nothing, no illusion, no display was going to take that away. The Queen's hands moved in slow, deliberate motions, and the holograms around the room flickered to life. Images appeared, bright, vivid scenes of Earth's future. First, it showed a thriving Earth, with cities full of life, technology advancing, and people working together. Then the images began to shift, growing darker. Shadows moved across the cities, alien ships descending from the sky. Earth's cities were engulfed in flames, and Arden could hear the distant sound of chaos. He saw people running, frightened, unable to stop the invasion. The Earth he loved, the world he had sworn to protect, was crumbling. "Your people will not survive the coming storm," the Queen whispered, her voice heavy with the weight of her words. "The galaxy is a dangerous place, and without allies, your people will fall. But I can save you. I can offer you the power to protect your world. I can offer you everything you need to secure the future of Earth." The images shifted again, showing Arden standing on a balcony overlooking the destruction. The Queen was beside him, her arm outstretched as if to show him that they could rebuild together. Together, "We can control the galaxy," she said. "Together we can ensure peace, true peace." Arden stood motionless, his heart pounding in his chest. The images felt real, the emotions raw. He could almost feel the heat of the flames, hear the cries of his people. The Queen's words were persuasive, powerful. She spoke with the kind of authority that could bend any mind to her will. It was tempting, so very tempting. But Arden had seen this trick before. He had heard stories of the Queen's illusions, how she could make even the strongest minds bend to her. She was trying to scare him, to manipulate his emotions, to make him believe that his only choice was to join her. But Arden wasn't just another diplomat. He wasn't just anyone. He had trained his mind for years, learning to resist manipulation and deceit. He took a slow, steady breath and closed his eyes. For a moment, the images still flickered in his mind, but he focused on the truth, on what he knew. He had seen the future, yes, but he knew that futures could change. The choices of individuals, the actions of people like him, could shift the course of events. He opened his eyes and looked directly at the Queen. "These visions don't control me," he said firmly, his voice calm and resolute. "I will not be deceived. I know what you're trying to do. You're showing me a future, but you're not showing me all of it. The future is shaped by the choices we make, and I choose to fight for Earth. I choose to fight for the future I believe in, not the one you want me to see." The Queen's eyes narrowed slightly, but her smile remained in place, though it was now tinged with a hint of frustration. She had not expected him to be so strong. Most beings would have crumbled under the weight of her vision, but Arden had resisted. "Well played," she said softly, her voice losing none of its power. "But you cannot outrun the truth forever. The galaxy will not wait for you to make your decisions. The forces that threaten your world are real, and soon they will come for you." Arden didn't flinch. "Then we will be ready," he said, his voice steady. "I will not let fear guide my actions. I will find another way, a way that doesn't involve manipulating others." The Queen's smile faded. She had tested him, but the result was not what she had hoped. She had expected him to fall for the illusion, to believe her lies, but Arden was different. He wasn't like the others. She had underestimated him, and for the first time in a long time, she found herself wondering if this human might actually be able to resist her. As she watched Arden leave the room, the Queen of Lies felt a flicker of something she hadn't felt in centuries: doubt. She had failed this time, but she was not one to give up easily. She would try again. She would find another way to break him. And when she did, she would make him hers. But Arden was already steps ahead. Days passed in the Queen's palace, but Arden's resolve remained unshaken. Each encounter with the Queen was more challenging than the last, as she continued to test his mind with her illusions, each one more intricate than the last, but each time. Arden resisted, his belief in his mission for peace growing stronger. The Queen, however, was not one to admit defeat. Her power over others was unmatched, and she would not allow this human to slip through her grasp. She had a new plan, something that would be more subtle. She would appeal to his deepest desires, his hopes for his people, for Earth. She would offer him something no one else could, the chance to shape the future, to be the one to decide the fate of his world. And she would do it in a way that would make him believe it was his idea all along. One evening, Arden was invited to a private dinner with the Queen. The invitation came as a surprise, as the Queen had not shown such personal interest in him before. The message was simple: let us talk, without illusions or distractions. Arden couldn't help but wonder what the Queen was planning. He had felt the weight of her manipulations before, but this time he was ready. He would not fall for her tricks, no matter how convincing. Still, the thought of speaking to her without the constant pressure of her magic was enough to make him curious. When he arrived at the designated dining hall, he found it unlike any of the others he had seen in the palace. The room was warm and inviting, with golden light spilling from overhead chandeliers. The air smelled of rich, earthy spices, and the table was set with simple yet elegant dishes. It was a far cry from the cold, sterile beauty of the Queen's throne room. The Queen was already seated at the table, her eyes sparkling with that same confident, knowing gleam. She wore a simple, flowing gown that was far more understated than anything she had worn before. Arden noted the change but said nothing. The Queen had always been a master of reading others, but tonight he would make sure she didn't read him so easily. "Please sit," the Queen said, her voice warm and inviting, her smile genuine. "I thought we could speak without the games this time, just two people, talking." Arden hesitated for a moment, but then took a seat across from her. He had never known the Queen to speak so openly before. The air between them felt less tense than usual, but that only made him more cautious. She was planning something, he could feel it. They ate in silence for a while, but the Queen was patient. She knew that Arden's resistance wasn't something that would be broken overnight. But tonight, she had something different in mind. "You must be tired of the endless games, Arden," she said finally, breaking the silence. "You and I both know that the galaxy is a dangerous place. Your people may be strong, but they are not prepared for what is coming. I have seen the future, and it is not kind to Earth. You are fighting a losing battle." Arden met her gaze without flinching. "I don't believe that. I believe that we can create our own future. We don't need to rely on control or manipulation to survive." The Queen leaned back in her chair, her smile fading slightly. But that's where you're wrong. You can't create your own future alone. The galaxy does not work like that. You are just one human in a sea of countless others. You can't protect your people without the right resources, the right allies." Her eyes softened, as if she were letting him in on a secret. "I can offer you those allies. I can give you the power to protect Earth, to ensure its place in the galaxy, not as a struggling world, but as a dominant force. And you could lead your people to heights beyond imagination, all with my guidance." Arden's heart pounded in his chest. He had known that this was coming, the Queen's offer, but hearing it, spoken so plainly, made it all the more tempting. He could protect Earth, could ensure the safety of his people. The Queen's promise seemed like the only way forward. For a moment, Arden felt doubt creep into his mind. What if she was right? What if, alone, Earth would fall, crushed by forces beyond its control? His duty to his people weighed heavily on him, and the thought of failing them, of watching them suffer, was almost too much to bear. The Queen noticed the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. She leaned forward, her voice softer now, almost coaxing. "You have the power to change the course of history, Arden. All you need to do is accept the truth, that you cannot do this alone. I am offering you a partnership, a chance to shape the galaxy alongside me. Together, we can bring about the peace your people need." Arden stayed silent for a long time, staring at his plate. The Queen's words lingered in the air, heavy with promise, but deep down, he knew that peace built on lies, on manipulation, was not true peace. It was a false peace, one that would crumble the moment it was tested. He would not allow himself to be a pawn in her game. Finally, he spoke, his voice steady. "Peace can't be built on control. It can't be built on fear. I won't choose that path." The Queen's smile never wavered, but her eyes darkened. "You will change your mind, Arden. I always get what I want. Sooner or later you will see that I am right, and when that day comes, I will be waiting." As Arden stood and left the room, He couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The Queen had offered him everything, and yet he had refused. That refusal would come with consequences. He didn't know what she had planned next, but he knew one thing for certain. The Queen would not give up easily, and neither would he. The following day, Arden awoke with a strange feeling of unease. The Queen's words echoed in his mind. "You will change your mind, Arden. I always get what I want." Her promises had been so tempting, so persuasive. He had never been offered power like that before. Power to shape the future of Earth, to protect his people from the dangers that lurked in the galaxy. But despite the allure, Arden was firm in his decision. He would not take the Queen's path, no matter how convincing her words were. Yet, as he stood on the balcony of his quarters, overlooking the shining city of Atria, the weight of his decision pressed heavily on his shoulders. The Queen had made it clear that she would not give up so easily. He knew that this was just the beginning. She would come at him again, stronger and more determined. He had to be ready. His thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock on the door. Arden turned, his hand resting on the hilt of his sidearm instinctively. But when he opened the door, he was met with an unexpected sight. A small, delicate messenger, no more than a child, stood before him. The messenger handed him a silver envelope before quickly retreating, vanishing down the hallway before Arden could even ask a question. Arden studied the envelope carefully. It was unlike anything he had seen before, made from some kind of shimmering material that almost seemed alive. The seal was marked with the Queen's insignia, a symbol he had come to recognize all too well. With a deep breath, he broke the seal and unfolded the letter inside. The writing was elegant, flowing like a song, yet the words it contained were sharp and cold. "Arden of Earth, I see that you are still resisting. But know this, I am patient. The choice is still yours to make. You can join me, and together, we will reshape the future. Or you can refuse and watch as your world falls to the forces that threaten it. Tonight, I offer you one last chance. Come to the heart of Atria, where we will settle this matter once and for all. Choose wisely." The letter ended abruptly, leaving no room for doubt. The Queen was done playing games. She would no longer try to coax him into agreeing. This time she would force his hand. Arden felt a wave of determination rise within him. This was it. The Queen was making her move, and he couldn't back down now. If he refused her again, she would see him as a threat. He had to be prepared for whatever came next. That evening, Arden made his way to the heart of Atria, the ancient core of the palace where the Queen had summoned him. The path to the heart was lined with towering stone statues, each one depicting a different figure from Atria's long history. The air was thick with the scent of incense, and the atmosphere felt heavier, charged with anticipation. When he reached the entrance to the heart, a large stone door opened silently before him, revealing the Queen standing in the center of the grand chamber. The room was vast, its walls adorned with glowing symbols that pulsed with life. At the far end of the chamber, a massive crystal throne stood, bathed in soft ethereal light. The Queen was already waiting, her figure illuminated by the glow of the crystal. She wore no gown this time, only a simple robe that flowed around her like mist. Her eyes, however, were as sharp as ever, filled with the cold intensity of someone who knew exactly what she wanted. "Arden," she greeted him, her voice both soft and commanding. "I'm glad you've come. I had hoped you would see reason." Arden stepped forward, his eyes narrowing. "I have seen enough, Your Majesty. I'm not here to change my mind. I'm here to tell you that I won't accept your offer. I won't fall into your trap." The Queen's smile flickered for just a moment, but she quickly regained her composure. "You still believe that your path is the right one? How quaint. but I don't think you understand just how fragile your world is. There are forces out there, forces that will destroy everything you love. You're fighting against something much larger than yourself, Arden. I understand perfectly, Arden replied, his voice steady. And I refuse to let fear control my actions. I know the dangers, and I know that Earth must stand on its own. We can't let ourselves become pawns in your game. The Queen took a step closer, her gaze never leaving his. You think you can protect your world with words? You think that your ideals will save you? You're wrong. You cannot defeat the threats that lie ahead without power, without allies, without me. Arden shook his head, a cold resolve settling in his chest. I don't need you to win. We will find another way. We will build our own future, without manipulation, without control. That is the only way forward. The Queen's expression hardened. She stepped back and raised her hands, her voice rising as she spoke. Then you leave me no choice, Arden. I warned you, but now you will face the consequences. A dark energy began to swirl around the Queen, coiling and twisting like a storm, ready to break. Arden tensed, sensing the power gathering around her. He had known this moment would come, but he was not afraid. The Queen could use her magic, her illusions, but he would not be swayed. He would stand firm, no matter what she tried. You can try to break me, but you'll never control me, he said, his eyes fixed on hers. I'll protect Earth, even if it costs me everything. The Queen's eyes narrowed, the storm of energy in the room intensifying. The final test had begun. The air in the heart of Atria grew thick with tension as the Queen raised her hands. Dark, swirling energy began to gather around her, rippling through the chamber like a living storm. The walls of the room seemed to pulse with the power she summoned. Arden stood firm, his eyes locked on the Queen, unwavering. He had known this was coming, and he was ready. You refuse to see the truth, the Queen said, her voice cool but filled with a growing edge of anger. You still believe that. You can resist me, that your ideals will protect your people. But you are only human, Arden. You are nothing compared to the power I possess. The energy around her intensified, crackling with dark power. Arden could feel the weight of her magic pressing against him, trying to invade his thoughts, trying to make him doubt his resolve. But he had been prepared for this. He had trained his mind for years, learning to resist the most powerful of illusions. The Queen's magic might be powerful, but it was not invincible. As the storm around her grew stronger, Arden took a deep breath. He focused, clearing his mind of all distractions. The Queen's illusions were meant to break him, to make him question his purpose. But he had something the Queen didn't understand, a sense of clarity that could not be shaken. The Queen's eyes narrowed as she watched him. She had thrown everything at him, her illusions, her threats. But still, he stood there, unbroken. It angered her more than she would admit. Do you really think you can win? She asked, her voice like ice. You think that your strength, your ideals, can stand against me, against the power of the galaxy? You are playing a dangerous game, Arden. But Arden did not waver. I don't need to win by your rules, he said calmly. I don't need to match you in power. I need to outlast you. I will protect Earth, and I will stop your lies. The Queen's lips curled into a smile, though there was no warmth in it. You think you can defeat me with words, with ideals? How charming. She raised her hands higher, and the storm of energy around her began to condense into a single, powerful burst. The chamber seemed to tremble as the force of her power surged. Arden's heart raced, but he remained calm. He could feel the energy building, ready to strike. The Queen was not holding back anymore. This was her final move. But Arden was no longer just reacting to her. He was thinking ahead, planning his next move. He couldn't match her power, but he didn't need to. As the Queen released the burst of energy, Arden sprang into action. He used the momentum of her magic against her. The burst of dark energy shot towards him, but at the last moment, he sidestepped, narrowly avoiding the blast. The energy surged past him, crashing into the wall behind him, leaving a massive crater in its wake. The Queen's expression shifted from anger to confusion. "You avoided my attack," she said, her voice colder than ever. "How?" Arden stood tall, his eyes locked on hers. "I know your power, Queen. I know your tricks, and I know how to fight back against them. I'm not here to win with strength. I'm here to show you that your lies won't work. I won't be your pawn." The Queen clenched her fists, her anger boiling over. She had underestimated this human. She had thought that with one powerful move she could break him, but he was still standing. "You think you can stop me?" she spat. "You are nothing more than a fool. You can resist, yes, but you cannot stop what is coming. You cannot stop the forces of the galaxy that will tear your world apart." Arden's gaze never faltered. "Maybe I can't stop everything," he said quietly, "but I can stop you. And that's what matters." With that, Arden focused all of his willpower, grounding himself in the truth he held. The Queen's power pulsed around him, but he didn't let it distract him. He had to act. In a flash, Arden sprinted forward, closing the distance between them in a matter of seconds. The Queen's eyes widened as he approached, but before she could react, Arden reached out, using his agility and speed to grab hold of a nearby object, a sharp, jagged piece of stone. Without hesitation, he hurled it directly at the Queen. The Queen raised her hand, and a barrier of dark energy shimmered into place, blocking the stone just inches from her. But Arden was not trying to strike her with it. The stone had served its purpose. It had drawn her attention, allowing Arden to move in for a second strike. He shifted his weight, taking advantage of her focus on the stone, and with a swift movement, he lunged toward the Queen. His goal wasn't to defeat her with force, it was to break her control over him. Arden's hand shot forward, and before the Queen could react, he grabbed her wrist, preventing her from summoning any more of her magic. The Queen looked at him in shock, her power now blocked by his own force of will. For the first time, she seemed unsure, vulnerable. "You cannot control me," Arden said, his voice steady but firm. "Your illusions will not break me. I will not be your pawn." For a moment, the Queen said nothing, her eyes filled with a mix of disbelief and something else, perhaps fear. She had always been in control. She had always won, but Arden's defiance had shaken her more than she was willing to admit. "You may think you've won," she said, her voice cold, "but this isn't over. I will not stop until you join me." Arden shook his head. "I'll never join you." The storm around them began to dissipate, but the Queen's dark expression lingered. Arden knew this was just a brief moment of victory. The real battle was far from over. The chamber fell silent after Arden's bold declaration. The Queen's dark energy had faded, but her anger lingered in the air like a thick fog. Arden stood his ground, his chest rising and falling steadily with each breath. The Queen's eyes narrowed as she slowly withdrew her hand from his grip, her face a mask of cold fury. "You think you have won," the Queen said quietly, her voice cold as ice. "But you have no idea what you are truly up against." Arden met her gaze without flinching. "I don't need to win, Your Majesty. I just need to make sure you know that I won't bow to you." The Queen's lips curled into a smile that was far from warm. "You misunderstand, Arden. This isn't about bowing or refusing. This is about survival. Your world is a fragile thing, and it is only a matter of time before the true forces of the galaxy tear it apart. Your refusal to accept my offer only hastens the inevitable." Arden clenched his fists, but he remained calm. He had expected this. The Queen would never give up, not so easily. Her pride wouldn't allow it. And yet, her words seemed to carry an edge of doubt now, something he hadn't seen before. He knew that he had cracked her carefully crafted facade, but it wasn't enough. She would come at him harder, with everything she had left. "Do you think the galaxy will spare Earth because of your stubbornness?" The Queen's voice had shifted, becoming more insistent. "You think that by resisting me, you're protecting your people, but you're only making them vulnerable. They are small, weak. They have no place in the galaxy's future unless they stand by my side." Arden shook his head slowly. "I don't need the galaxy's favor. Earth will make its own way. We will find allies, and we will protect ourselves. We don't need you." The Queen's eyes flashed, and for a brief moment, the room seemed to darken. The air crackled with unseen power as her patience began to thin. "You don't understand, Arden. You are not prepared for what is coming. You cannot protect your people without me. You cannot stop what I am bringing." For a moment, Arden felt the weight of her words. The challenges ahead were great. He knew that. He knew Earth was vulnerable and that there were forces out there that would stop at nothing to see humanity fall. But he also knew something the Queen had failed to understand. Earth had something the rest of the galaxy didn't. The human spirit. "We've always fought against the odds," Arden said, his voice firm. "Our history is built on standing up when others said we couldn't. I'm not asking for your help. I'm asking you to leave us be." The Queen's face darkened. She stepped back, a shadow moving across her features. "Very well," she said softly. "If you will not accept my offer, then you will be forced to face the consequences. But mark my words, Arden, you will regret this. Your people will regret this." Before Arden could respond, the Queen raised her hand high. The ground trembled beneath his feet, and the air grew heavy with the force of her magic. Arden's instincts screamed at him to move, but he stood his ground. He had made his choice. Suddenly the room was filled with a deafening roar as the Queen summoned the full fury of her power. The chamber itself seemed to bend and twist as if it were alive. The walls warped, and cracks appeared in the ceiling, sending dust falling to the floor in heavy clumps. The Queen's magic swirled around her like a living storm, dark energy rising up like a wave ready to crash over him. "Prepare yourself, Arden." The Queen's voice echoed through the chaos. "This is your final warning." Arden's eyes widened as the storm of energy surged toward him. He didn't have time to think. The Queen was far more powerful than he had imagined. Her magic was like nothing he had ever faced. It would destroy him if he didn't act quickly. He dove to the side, just as a wave of dark energy tore through the space where he had been standing, ripping a deep gouge in the stone floor. Arden rolled across the ground, barely avoiding the blast. The power of the Queen's attack had shaken the very foundations of the palace. He could hear the distant sounds of chaos in the streets as her magic began to tear at the city itself. He rose to his feet, his heart pounding, and focused on the Queen. The storm of energy continued to surge around her, but Arden could see the strain in her face now. She was pushing herself to the limit. This wasn't just an attack, it was a gamble. She was risking everything to force him to submit. But Arden would not give in. With a deep breath, he moved again, his body moving like a shadow through the chaos. He dodged another surge of dark energy, his mind focused. He had to get close. He had to take away her advantage, her magic. That was the only way to stop her. He reached for a nearby piece of stone, a jagged rock that had been torn from the floor. With a quick motion, he hurled it at the queen, not with the intention of hitting her, but to distract her. As she deflected the stone with a wave of her hand, Arden closed the gap between them. He reached out and grabbed her wrist, just as he had done before. This time, though, he was ready. He knew what she would try, and he was prepared to stop her. "You've pushed me too far, Your Majesty," Arden said through gritted teeth. "I will protect my people, no matter what it takes." The queen's eyes burned with fury. But for the first time, Arden saw the slightest flicker of doubt in her gaze. She had never faced anyone like him before, someone who refused to yield, no matter how great the odds. "Oh, Minnie." The queen's grip tightened around her own power, her magic swirling violently, but Arden did not release his hold on her wrist. He could feel the tremor of her energy pulsing through the air, but his focus remained unshaken. This was it. The point of no return. The queen's fury was palpable, but it was clear to him that she was beginning to run out of options. She had underestimated the human spirit, something she could never quite control. "You think you can defeat me like this?" The queen's voice was filled with a cold, sharp edge. "You are foolish, Arden. This battle is far from over." Arden's eyes met hers, steady and unblinking. "I've never claimed it was over," he said, his voice firm. "But I'm not going to back down. Not now, not ever." The queen's face twisted in a mixture of disbelief and anger. She tried to summon more power, her hands crackling with dark energy, but Arden held firm. She was growing weaker, her control was slipping. The storm of magic that had once swirled around her seemed to flicker, its intensity fading. For a moment, Arden could feel the strain in her, the toll the battle had taken. The queen, for all her might, was beginning to doubt herself. And it was this doubt, this moment of hesitation, that Arden needed. "You're not invincible," Arden said, his words cutting through the tension like a blade. "No one is. Not even you." The queen recoiled slightly, her eyes flashing with fury. "You dare to question me?" she hissed, and for a moment it seemed as though the very ground beneath their feet might crack open. But Arden wasn't afraid. He had seen the strength of human resolve before. He had seen it in the faces of the people of Earth when they refused to give in to the darkness of the galaxy. They had fought back time and time again. They had survived against impossible odds. And Arden would be the one to carry that torch. "You're not my enemy," Arden said, his voice softer now, but filled with determination. "Your desire for control, your lust for power, it's what's hurting you. You're not fighting to protect anything, you're fighting for yourself." The queen's eyes narrowed, her lips curling into a sneer. "You're wrong. I fight for order, for stability, for a future where I control everything. You, Arden, are too naive to understand." "I don't need to understand your vision of order," Arden replied. "All I need to understand is that Earth's future belongs to its people, not to you, not to anyone who tries to force their will on them." With a final surge of will, Arden twisted his grip, pushing the queen's arm back. The storm around her flickered one last time before completely dissipating, leaving the chamber eerily still. The queen staggered slightly, her breath quickening, but she quickly regained her composure. "Enough of this," the queen snarled, her eyes flashing with rage. "I will not be bested by a mere human." Suddenly, the ground beneath them began to tremble once more. This time, however, it wasn't just the queen's magic that was shaking the earth. Arden felt it in his bones. The entire palace was beginning to collapse. It was as though the very foundation of the heart of Atria was crumbling, unable to withstand the force of their conflict. "You're destroying everything," Arden said, his eyes wide as the room began to crack and shift. "Is this really what you want, to tear it all apart for your own ego?" The Queen glared at him, but there was a flicker of doubt in her gaze. You think I'm the one destroying this place? You don't understand, Arden. I'm trying to save it. I'm trying to bring order to a chaotic galaxy. You don't have the vision I do. I have my own vision, Arden replied, stepping back. One where Earth stands free. One where your empire doesn't control us. As the room continued to shake, the Queen's face contorted with frustration. She had tried every trick, every illusion, and yet Arden had resisted. He hadn't given in to her power, her threats, her promises. And now, as her stronghold began to collapse around them, she realized something she had never expected. She was losing. The Queen took a step back, her hands trembling with the effort to maintain control. The ground beneath her began to crack further, sending splintering noises echoing through the chamber. The crystal throne in the distance began to shatter, its once magnificent surface cracking apart. The symbols on the walls dimmed, and the air grew thick with dust. Arden's eyes never left her. He could see the cracks in her facade, the power slipping through her fingers like sand. She had always been in control, always the one with the upper hand. But now, for the first time, she was the one on the defensive. She was the one unsure of what to do. You're losing, Arden said simply, his voice steady despite the chaos. And it's not because you're weak. It's because you've relied too much on force. You think control comes from power, but it doesn't. It comes from trust, from understanding. The Queen's gaze darkened. She looked around, seeing the destruction she had caused, feeling the power she had tried to wield slipping away. And, in that moment, for just a fleeting second, she realized that Arden was right. She had tried to impose order without understanding what it truly meant to protect something. But before she could speak, the palace gave one final tremor. The floor beneath them cracked wide open, and the chamber began to collapse in on itself. Arden took a step back, his heart racing. The Queen, standing in the midst of her crumbling empire, was left with no choices. You could have had everything, she whispered, her voice strained. But you chose nothing. Arden didn't respond. His mission wasn't about her or her empire. It was about Earth, about the future of humanity. And no matter what the Queen said, he would never let her win. The palace of Atria shook with violent tremors. Dust rained from above, and the walls cracked like dry earth. Magic, once controlled by the Queen, now spun wild in the air, like a storm without a center. Arden stood near the edge of a large crack in the floor, watching the Queen struggle to stay on her feet. Her long cloak was torn, her golden crown had fallen, and her eyes no longer glowed with power but with fear. You still have time, Arden shouted over the chaos. Stop this, we don't have to fall with this place. The Queen stared at him. Her pride was breaking, like the stones beneath her. All her plans, her deceptions, her control over thousands of worlds falling apart in minutes. No, she whispered. I can still fix this. I can still... She raised her hand, trying to summon her magic again. But this time, nothing came. No light, no power. The heart of Atria, the crystal that had fed her strength for centuries, was gone, shattered in the collapse. Without it, she was just a person. Powerful still, but no longer a goddess. You don't need power to lead, Arden said, slowly walking toward her across the shaking floor. You need honesty. You need people who choose to stand with you, not people who are tricked into it. The Queen looked at him with wide, uncertain eyes. For the first time, she truly saw him, not just a human, not just a visitor from a small world, but a man who had stood through every test, every lie, every trap she had set, and never broke. You knew, she said quietly. You knew I was lying from the beginning. Arden nodded. You tried to control the truth. But truth isn't something you can bend forever. The ground gave a terrible groan, and a large section of the ceiling crashed down between them. Smoke and dust filled the air. Arden coughed, covering his mouth, and jumped back to avoid falling stone. On the other side, he could barely see the Queen's outline, standing in the shadows. "I won't be remembered like this," the Queen called out. "I was trying to save the galaxy." "You tried to rule it, not save it," Arden replied, "but you can still choose something better. Help me stop this before everyone in this palace dies." There was silence. Then the Queen stepped forward, her face covered in dust, her steps slow. The palace shook again, harder now. A deep rumble filled the air, like the building was crying in pain. The Queen looked around. Her empire, once perfect and powerful, was gone. But in that moment, she made a choice. "Fine," she said, her voice calm now. "I will help you." Together, they climbed the cracking stairs to the center of the palace, where the last piece of the energy core still pulsed weakly. Arden reached for the control, and the Queen placed her hand beside his. With one final effort, they pushed their energy into the system, trying to release the pressure building below. A bright light burst out from the core. A wave of clean blue energy surged through the walls, pushing away the wild magic, calming the storm. The palace stopped shaking. The silence after the chaos was heavy. Arden let out a long breath and stepped away from the machine. He turned to the Queen. She looked tired, older somehow, but something in her eyes had changed. She no longer looked at him like a toy or a fool, but as an equal. "What now?" she asked. "Now," Arden said, "you let your people choose their future. No more lies, no more tricks." The Queen nodded slowly. "And Earth?" "Earth will be free," he said. "We'll stand on our own. We may be small now, but we're stronger than you ever expected." A soft smile touched her lips. "Yes, I see that now." Arden walked away from the ruins of the throne room, stepping into the bright morning light outside. Ships hovered above, unsure, watching. But they would soon see that something had changed. The Witch Queen of Lies had been defeated, not by war, but by truth. And the human who had stood alone now became a symbol across the stars. Earth was no longer ignored. It was respected, and in the hearts of many, the name Arden would never be forgotten.